Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tushita, and welcome everybody joining online as well. And we are very fortunate to be welcoming Venerable Thubten Dechen for the second time to Tushita. I've known Venerable for more than 10 years. We did a course at Kopan Monastery in Kathmandu, a 1-month course on the whole Lamrim with a great Australian teacher, Venerable Gyatso, and then Lama Zopa Rinpoche taught us for, I think, about 2 weeks. He was giving teachings every day, so that was very precious. And many of us from that, course are still very much involved in the studying and serving at centers, doing retreats, and most of us are still in touch with each other. And so Venerable has been, actually, she used to serve at Tushita Dharamshala. I think you were helping the SPC, right? SPC. So, and then after that you went to Italy. Oh, before that you were living in Delhi. Yeah, that's something interesting to mention. Venerable has lived for 3 years in Delhi, in GK3, working for Handicap International, if I'm not mistaken, right? And so then Tushita Dharamshala, and then you went to Italy. And you did both the basic and the master's program simultaneously, if I'm not wrong, right? Only one part of the master's, all right. And now continuing with the master's program, a second batch, right? Wow. So Venerable has been traveling to India for the winter break. And she was just now in South India, just came back and is leaving back to Italy after tomorrow. So we're very happy, very fortunate to be welcoming Venerable again. And Venerable, please share the Dharma, please teach. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. Can you help me, because I can hardly see what I'm doing? Done. Okay. Can everyone hear? Yes? Wee! Fantastic. Good news. Free. Okay. All right. So a word about this evening, and I'm pretty flexible, so you can interrupt, say that doesn't help. If I say any words you don't understand, please ask, because sometimes there are people who've met the Dharma and understand and have heard it for a long time, and then there are other people, it's their first time, and you say a word and they have no idea what that means. So don't be afraid to say, what does that mean? So we'll do a brief meditation just to settle ourselves and get comfortable. And then we're going to tackle a topic that was suggested. And we'll have time for questions, because that's what really makes it relevant and helpful, because I don't know you all, and so I can share a bit of what I've studied and what I've read and what's in the texts and some experience, but it really, you have to help it make sense for you, and that's where asking questions really helps. So we'll go through the material, and then the questions really help make it more personal, make it more relevant, make it more direct. okay? Because sometimes we can talk about what's in the text and it sounds really daunting. And you think, what? But how can I apply that? That's too much for me, right? And it just becomes this big scary thing. And then the questions help us sort of bring it down to earth, okay? So don't be afraid to ask questions. That's how to make it useful and meaningful, okay? All right, everyone got that? Okay. All right, so let's just take a moment to settle down, prepare the mind. So just come sitting comfortably on the chair or the cushion. And we try to establish a posture that's supportive for the mind. And so with this, the most important thing is to have a back that is straight but not tense. And shoulders relaxed. And bringing the awareness to the top of the head. Gently scan down the body, using the awareness to release any tension. Relaxing the head, the neck, relaxing the shoulders, relaxing the chest, the tummy, and the hips, the legs and the feet. And as you relax the body, the mind relaxes in a natural way. And we can take a long breath in and exhale, letting go of any thoughts, any worries, any distractions, anything that's keeping us from being fully present. Just be here now. And since we're going to talk about Dharma, we try to set a positive motivation. Thinking that we have this amazing, precious human life, but it won't last. And so we want to do something useful, something meaningful with our lives. And the most precious thing we have to offer others is ourselves, our qualities. And so we're going to listen, reflect, think, and just be here in the hope to develop our hearts and our minds so that we can be of benefit to sentient beings, and that this can become one more step on our path to enlightenment, to becoming fully enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so with that motivation, when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So today's topic is embracing uncertainty and cultivating courage and openness in the face of the unknown. This is quite a big topic. And so I thought we could start by looking at what is courage. What is courage in a conventional sense and what is courage in a Dharma sense? So I looked up a few definitions online, as we do. Google has the answer. So courage. So one dictionary says it's mental or moral strength to persevere and withstand danger or difficulty. Cambridge Dictionary, the ability to control your fear in a dangerous or difficult situation. A psychological dictionary, or a dictionary of psychology, says it's the ability to meet a difficult challenge despite physical, psychological, or moral risks involved in doing so. So in all of this, there's two components. You've got the difficult situation, whatever that is, and then how are you feeling about it, which is not great, the fear element. So you've got a difficult situation and you're not feeling great, but you persevere. And it's the moral strength to persevere, to keep going. So we might face a difficult situation and we're not happy about it, but we say, okay, I'm going to persist, I'm going to persevere. So is that clear? There's two components. There is a situation and how we're feeling about it, and it's the mental strength to persevere. Okay, clear? Because let's talk about what courage isn't. So courage isn't ease, comfort. It comes naturally, it comes easy. It isn't jumping off the top diving board if you're an Olympic diver. It isn't going out on stage if you're a concert pianist and playing for the 1000th time to an audience. By the time you've done it 1,000 times, you know how to do it. That isn't courage. That's skill, it's ease, it's proficiency. The first time you went out as a concert pianist, that probably took courage. You had the difficult situation, I have to play to a hall full of people. I'm terrified, and you go and do it anyway. That's courage. And then as Shantideva says, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And there's nothing that doesn't get easier with practice. But the first time you do it requires courage. The first time you've got the scary situation, the fear, the terror, the panic, maybe you're vomiting backstage, who knows, but you go and do it anyway. That's courage. It being easy is the result of having had courage in the first place to do it. Are we clear on that? Okay. And so then we might think, well, why would anyone want to do this? You know, we all want comfort, we all want ease, we'd all rather stay home. Like we were saying, it's raining, you know, we all want comfort. We do, okay, but we also want to grow. And so very practically, we have to ask ourselves when we're facing a difficult situation, what is the benefit of staying in my comfort zone? And what's the disadvantage? And what's the long-term benefit? If I take this risk, if I do this thing, what's the long-term gain? And what's the long-term risk if I don't do it? And we have to really do that analysis to give ourselves the mental fortitude to whatever it is, go out on stage that first time. And I think that, you know, the first time I did this for myself, I was in my 20s and I had a good job, right? Every parent wants their kids to have a good job. And I came from a family where my parents were homeless, so they were thrilled when I got a good job. But then I wanted to travel, and I had all the fear that comes with that. What if I don't get a job when I come back? How am I going to tell my mother? All of these things. But it's the same process. Whether you have a spiritual goal or a worldly goal, it's the same process. You have to identify what is the cost if I stay where I am? Because there's some benefit, but what am I sacrificing? I'm sacrificing my growth, I'm sacrificing my opportunity. I'll never know what it's like to do all those things or go all those places. And I'm always going to be that person that's scared. And what's the benefit if I do the thing, whatever the thing is? Well, I get to... It's okay. What are the benefits if I do the thing, whatever it is? I grow, I travel, I explore. What are the risks? I might not get a job. I might, you know, that's a personal evaluation. But whether you're trying to cultivate spiritual qualities or in a mundane setting, it's the same thing as someone else wrote the phrase, feel the fear and do it anyway. That's courage. And how do we do it then? So now this is where this is where language lets us down a bit. So in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the Bodhisattva's way of life, Shantideva talks a lot about courage, but it isn't called courage. It's called something different. It's called patience. And the word lets us down because patience, we think, oh, you know, patience means waiting in line, very passive, putting up with things we don't like. But patience, zopa, the word that gets translated into patience, actually is this formidable mind of mental fortitude that is able to bear hardship and bear difficulty for the sake of a great goal, for the sake of spiritual development. And in this case, it's for the sake of attaining enlightenment. It's called patience, but it's actually courage of facing difficulty and having the mental decision, I'm going to proceed and do it anyway. And there's a second place, and we can come on to that, where it's also included, and it's in the chapter on joyous effort. That's a second component of courage, which in, what's his name? In one of the commentaries on Bodhisattva Charyavatara, it's called courageous self-confidence. It's actually a component of joyous effort. And it's an antidote to laziness. So we don't think of self-confidence being an antidote to laziness, but that's how it's posited in the Bodhisattva's way of life. And it's logical. If you don't have self-confidence, if you don't have a mind that thinks, I can do it, well, what are you going to do? If we don't have self-confidence to think, I can, we'll never start. So another component of courage is this mind that thinks I can do. And that is an antidote to the laziness that doesn't even start. Again, I'm speaking here in the context of the Bodhisattva's way of life, for the Bodhisattva who wants to attain enlightenment. And the Bodhisattvas have incredible courage. You know, it's written in the text that they say they make prayers to stay in the hell realms for eons just to help one sentient being generate one virtuous thought. To have that kind of fortitude, steadfastness, persistence requires huge amounts of courage. And if you want to help sentient beings who are suffering, you're going to have to go to uncomfortable and difficult places, almost by definition. Sentient beings are suffering, you want to help them, you're going to have to go where it's uncomfortable. Well, that doesn't sound fun. Well, that's how you develop patience. So, okay, so how do we develop this mind? So Shantideva says, start small. Start with the small things. How do we cultivate patience? With starting with the small discomforts. So he says things like insect bites. He calls them meaningless sufferings. For us, that's not so meaningless. I mean, I got bitten by an ant the other day and I'm still scratching. I wouldn't really call that meaningless suffering. But, you know, for us, you know, they're pretty significant. So in his meaningless sufferings, he includes snake bites. Also not so meaningless for us, but he's a bodhisattva. Okay. So, but the point is, start small. Because when we start with small things, we get better and better and more able to train. And we cultivate resilience. And he says, if you start with small inconveniences, small difficulties, maybe your food isn't that great, and instead of sending it back, you just say, okay, fine, I'll eat it. Like, what's the big deal? Just a mind that says, okay, it's not a big deal. We don't need to make such a big deal out of everything, might be another way of putting it. So we start with the small inconveniences. And then we build up our resilience, because the more we have a mind that says, okay, no big deal, the easier it gets. And so if we train in bearing the discomfort that arises within us, which is just a feeling, it's what's going on within us. It isn't the external environment. It's what's going on within us when we face difficulty. If we train in bearing it a little bit, it gets easier to deal with the more difficult things. So that's how he says, start small. And why do we do that? Because we want to grow. Because we have capabilities. We have generosity up to a point. We have patience up to a point. Woe betide the person who crosses the boundary line, right? It's like, here is the limits of where my patience, my generosity, my wisdom, my concept, here is the limit. And I'll go that far and not an inch further. And if you try and push me, the result is not pretty, is how a lot of us are. You're looking, don't leave me hanging. Don't look at me like it's just me, right? We're all human here. You know? And I mean, I say this as someone who's dealing with this. Like, please don't think that you know, I'm sharing this as like, oh, I've mastered. No, I mean, my limits were, I was telling Nico, I was with a teacher of mine last week, he pushed my limit, there were tears. And then he actually said, you know, you need to practice patience. And I thought, right, yes, that's true, I do. And then I thought, and I have to talk to other people about patience next week, and I haven't done it. But we're all working on this, you know, we're humans. And actually it said you don't master patience until the third bodhisattva ground. So even when you have the direct realization of emptiness, you still haven't mastered patience. You've still got 2 more levels to go before you even master patience. So we're in this for the long haul, guys. I don't know what to tell you. So we start small. We start small with the small things and we just keep going. And even the bodhisattvas are working on it too. So let's be gentle with ourselves. But the point is, each time we push our comfort zone or go beyond our comfort zone just a little bit, we've grown it. We get more and more comfortable. It's the same with exercise. Right? It's the same with anything. It's the same with learning to drive, learning to cook. It's difficult at first, and you reach a point where you usually want to give up. But every time you push through, and I'm not saying go crazy, okay? I'm not saying take off your armbands and go off the top diving board straight away, but each time we feel resistance. Each time we feel resistance and we say, no, I'm going to go through, I'm going to do it, we've expanded our comfort zone that much more. What does that mean? It means you've expanded your capacity. And everyone's limits are different. For some people, getting out of bed is a win. For some people, leaving the house is a win. One of my sisters, and she won't mind me saying it because it's on Facebook, so you know. One of my sisters had difficulty recently, and she couldn't leave the house. She didn't have the self-confidence to leave the house. And that's a very real challenge for a lot of people. The win is getting up and leaving the house. So she left the house, and then she went to a horse sanctuary, and that was part of her psychological treatment. That was win number 2. Number 1 was get out the house. Number 2 was make it to the sanctuary, and that was part of her treatment. And now she works there. Now she's an employee, she works there, and she spends her days helping the horses, benefiting them. She took me around feeding them, mucking them out, and now she's able to benefit all of these animals. And it started with just leaving the house. So everyone's boundary is different, and only you know you. For some people, having a shower is a win. And if that's tough and that's all you do, but you do it, amazing. But you take the shower, you get up, you leave the house, and then you meet people. And when you meet people, sometimes you can benefit them. And that's the thing about courage. It isn't just you that benefits from your courage. Other people do too. And so every time you expand that comfort zone a little bit more by going through, the world and other people get to benefit from the skills and qualities that you bring. And the funny thing is, sometimes you don't even know that you have them until you see them in action, because you got up, you had the shower, you got out the house, and you went out into the world. So courage isn't just about us. It's about bringing the qualities that we have maybe hidden and bringing them out into the world so that other people can benefit too. So it's something that really helps us and helps others to cultivate. So, okay, so we have to start small. Now, related to that, there's another component, which is, okay, if we want to benefit others, oh, I'm losing my clothes, excuse me. You know, if we want to help others, mental composure, having a mind that's able to bear difficulty is so valuable. You know, if you think of people who, I mean, let's take the example of, I don't know, but I imagine like all the people who, I don't know if we talked about this last time, the Sikhs and the Gurdwaras who give food to everybody, right? And they do that around the world. They do that in earthquake situations. They're, you know, if they're in the States, they're probably doing that in the States. That's not easy work. Benefiting people, going out to where it's difficult, it isn't easy. And so you have to have a mental fortitude that just says, okay, I can do this. I'm going to do this. You can't fall apart all the time. You can't become overwhelmed by your emotions. So even that, being a doctor, being a nurse, all of that kind of work requires a mental composure that says, okay, I can do this, despite the difficult situation and despite the unpleasant emotions that might arise in you while you're doing the work. So courage benefits you and it benefits others. So I'm drawing on chapter 6 of Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And he says, he uses the word patience. Oh, I don't like patience. I wish we could change it to courage, but I don't write the text. What can I say? So there are three times in chapter 6 where he says patience, this courageous attitude are helpful. So the first is when we are confronting suffering, our own suffering. The second is when we're practicing Dharma, our spiritual practice. And the third is when we're trying to benefit sentient beings. Because if you've ever tried to benefit sentient beings, you will surely be punished for your efforts in one way, shape, or form. People won't like it, they don't appreciate it, human beings are difficult, and so on and so forth. So, no good deed goes unpunished, as the saying goes. So you need patience even when you're trying to benefit sentient beings. So let's start with the first one. So patience when bearing suffering. So training to have a mind, this mental composure, this sort of unflappability. I don't know how, that's the best word I can think of. Instead of being in a panic, we're sort of unflappable, we're calm in the face of difficulty. So how to cultivate that? Now listen, this stuff is not the easy stuff. This isn't the beginner's class stuff, okay? But this is, if I'm going to answer the question that came in of, okay, this is what we want to talk about, this is why I say I'm going to give this and then we can talk about it and you can ask and we can exchange and discuss. This isn't beginner stuff. It isn't necessarily easy, but I'll share it. We can discuss it. We can interrogate it. Okay, so here we go. So do you have here the book Transforming Problems into Happiness? Transforming Problems into Happiness. Is that what it's called? Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Okay. Yeah, so there is a text by Lama Zopa Rinpoche called Transforming Problems into Happiness, and it's based on Shantideva's text, and it's based on Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, and it's from the Lojong genre of teachings. It's that book is all about this part. So this part of facing suffering and not being overwhelmed by it, it's a really good book. It's very thin, but it's a really good book. But it's based on Shantideva chapter 6 and Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. It's based on a text that's based on those. So what he says is, look, he says, okay, do the evaluation. He says, think about the problems you've had in your life. Has calling them and labeling problems ever helped you? Has it ever reduced your mental suffering? No, right? So what we tend to do is we have a situation, we don't like it, and we immediately label it a problem. But what happens when we do that is the minute we label something a problem, then a whole set of other things come into play. We develop negative emotions, we get upset, mental exaggeration, I mean, we know the story. We've all done it. So he says, as long as you label something a problem and allow it to disturb your mind, you are the one that's causing the problem to your own happiness. So labeling something as a problem and then allowing it to disturb your mind and nourishing that, when you do that, you are causing your own suffering. So instead, he says we have to stop the thought of seeing every single adversity that confronts us as a problem. And instead, we have to see it as beneficial. He says, if we really want to develop a resilient mind, we have to see adversity and difficult situations not just as beneficial for our spiritual practice, but as necessary for our spiritual practice. This is ninja level stuff, but it is what it is. So let's take an example. So Well, no, there's a point actually. No, there's a quotation I wanted to share from Pema Chodron before that, because the point here is she says something very nice, and I forget which text. I wish I knew, but it's a Pema Chodron quote, and she says, "Nothing ever goes away until it has taught us what we need to know." And so, in a way, our problems then, whatever we're dealing with, anxiety, fear, sadness, grief, we tend to have emotional patterns. And whatever situations we're facing tend to activate those habitual patterns within us. And they don't go away until they've taught us what we need to know. And each one of those problems, the way we react, is an invitation to become a more developed, a more rounded individual, more resilient, better able to cope. Nothing goes away until it's taught us what we need to know. And in that way, adversity and the reactions we have to it are like the sound of the meditation bell, awakening us to the possibility of practice. And that's how our problems can become beneficial. If we use them as a sign of, oh, here's where I need to grow, here's what I'm up against, here's the resistance, here's the limit of my comfort zone that I need to go through if I'm going to get to the other side and become the person that I want to be and that I'm capable of being. So there's an example that was given to me, but it's a good example. I'm going to use the example of anxiety, because anxiety, irrational fear in general is one of those things that or panic, one of those things that a lot of people have. You could use depression, you could use grief, there's other things you could use, but I'm just going to pick anxiety. It's one of those things that once it starts, you can't just switch it off. There isn't an off button. It's one of those emotions that just once it gets going, it's like you're locked into a roller coaster. You know those roller coaster cars? And you're at the top of the roller coaster. And you ain't getting out, the only way is down. So you're in for the ride. It's one of those. You've kind of got to bear it. So there's two ways of dealing with it. You can bear it, or you can bear it, or, which is already difficult, okay? You can bear it, or you can use this and say, okay, I'm going to take this into my spiritual practice. I'm at the top of the roller coaster. It feels horrible. I don't like it. It's unpleasant. There's no off button. I've got to deal with this. Okay, how can I make it meaningful? How can I make it beneficial for others? And in that moment, there is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to practice what's called Tonglen. Some of you may have heard of it. Some of you probably haven't. Who hasn't? Okay. So Tonglen is a meditation, and again, we're going to stick with anxiety because it's the unpleasant one that doesn't go away, or irrational fear, whatever. So Tonglen is a meditation practice where we are suffering, and we say, okay, it isn't pleasant, it isn't nice. How can I make it meaningful? So in that moment, you've identified your own suffering, and you say, okay, if I have to go through this, let me make it meaningful. I'm going to take not just my suffering, but the suffering of others. And so the meditation visualization, it can be done in a lot of ways, but more or less, they all have a similar theme. You imagine outside of your body at the level of the heart, a black ball, which is your, let's call it your suffering, your self-cherishing, your own fear, your own difficult emotions, and you imagine it at the level of your heart, outside the body, just around here. A friend of mine likes to imagine it as a glass jar. So now here you are, whatever it is, in a black hole, suffering, difficult, unpleasant, no way out. And in that darkness, the one good thing is you now know how everybody else with that emotion feels. every caged animal, every prisoner on death row, every afraid person. You now in that moment know how every single other sentient being with that emotion feels. And there's lots of us.
Empathy.
It is empathy, yeah. Our difficult emotions give us empathy to know how everybody else feels. And anxiety is one I struggle with. When I do this meditation, I imagine the animals going to the slaughterhouse. I'm like, I know how that feels. I don't know the specific situation, but I know the emotion. I know fear. I know panic. I know anxiety. I know this. Okay. So then what do you do? So you've got this black ball outside the body at the level of the heart, containing all your own destructive emotions. And now you have empathy to understand everybody else with that emotion. And we, instead of shutting down and closing off, this is the moment we open up to others. We connect with others. And I tell you, in the moment that you even think of others, something already happens to your suffering. It lessens slightly. Because you're changing the direction of energy from this being closed up and grasping at yourself outwards. But we don't stop there. So now you're imagining others, understanding with empathy the difficulty that they have, and you imagine their suffering. And on an inhale, you imagine breathing in, and like a vacuum cleaner, okay? Like the vacuum cleaner, you imagine sucking out their suffering, and it goes into the black ball. And so as you breathe in, you're just imagining like a vacuum. That's not my idea. Someone else came up with the analogy. It's brilliant. So you're vacuum cleaning everybody else's suffering, fear, and so on, and it's all going into that black ball outside the body. And you imagine just taking away all their suffering. Why? Because you know how it feels and it sucks. You know the pain. You don't want it for you. You don't want it for anybody. Most of the worst pain we experience, we wouldn't wish on our worst enemy. So we know, we take it out, vacuum it all out, it goes into the black ball. And on the in-breath, we use the breath, okay? You imagine it goes there. And then the ball gets bigger and bigger, and you explode it. And you just imagine all your suffering, all the suffering you've breathed in has completely disappeared and gone. And they are free of their suffering, and you are free of yours. And then from that space, you can emanate light, healing, whatever you want to them, and imagine them fulfilled, happy, satisfied, and joyful. That, honestly, is the only viable, realistic antidote I've certainly ever found to panic, anxiety, fear, and so on. If there's another one, let's all share it because we're all friends. You can use it with lots of difficult emotions, sadness, grief. And I know, I may have mentioned this last time, but I know a lady who had cancer, and she did this practice. And she said she had so many people phoning up wanting to help her because she had cancer. And all she wanted them to do was leave her alone because she just wanted to do this meditation practice. It's incredibly powerful. And it doesn't necessarily mean everything gets solved, but you're training the mind to become more and more resilient. And you're training the mind that in your darkest hour, what are you doing? You reach out because you know suffering. You understand others' suffering. So, okay, breathe in. So it's a really worthwhile practice. And that is how, whatever suffering we have, we can bring it into the path. We make it a spiritual practice. And that's how it can become beneficial. So we don't have to like problems. I mean, Kyabje Zopa Rinpoche says we should like problems. It actually says in the book, we should like problems the way we like ice cream. And my answer to that is, yeah, but Rinpoche was diabetic, so I don't know what ice cream he was eating, you know. So we don't necessarily have to like problems the way we like ice cream, but we can see them as a way for developing our qualities and developing our spiritual practice. And so then whatever difficulty we have, whether it's sadness, grief, depression, anxiety, this kind of practice is a way that we can take what's difficult for us and grow and develop our hearts. Now, and even if not, even if just in that moment, even if we just think, okay, may I benefit sentient beings. If I have to go through this, may it be of benefit. Even just that thought, if you're having a difficult time and you even just have that thought, may it be of benefit to sentient beings, watch what happens to your mind. The minute you have that thought, just watch your own mind. It changes. Because the altruistic mind is in the nature of happiness. So we're going from this grasping fear, which is natural, but to a mind that says, okay, if this, then others. And just that moment, that the moment you have that thought, that already lessens the suffering, the heart becomes more courageous. It doesn't mean you feel wonderful instantly, but it's a great help in allowing us to confront what faces us with fortitude and what is called patience, but is really this formidable, courageous attitude that will help us through life. Now, the other component. So, I just want to say, okay, the other component to that, I just want to say this because this might sound a bit overwhelming, but again, we just start in stages. Just start small. So even if that all sounds too much and too terrifying, you just start with a small thought. May I be of benefit? May this benefit others? If I have to go through this, may something be of benefit. Because probably it will be. Whatever difficulty you face, you learn and you can help somebody else afterwards, right? We often have that. We've gone through something, so we know how to help someone else. Okay. So the second occasion where it's helpful to have patience, this courageous mind, is when practicing Dharma. So what do I mean by practicing Dharma? Practicing Dharma is really where we're trying to cultivate positive qualities, love, compassion, wisdom, and we're trying to reduce the negative, and trying to reduce the negative karma we create. And as we've seen, we have these qualities up to a certain point and then no further, and don't push us. Most of us can usually identify that. So having patience, having this mind that says, okay, I'll do it, is really helpful in helping us grow our Dharma practice and our Dharma skills. You know, Kandrila says, you don't get qualities just by wishing for them. That was so disappointing when she said that, because there I'd been, you know, good nun, saying my prayers, aspirational prayers, you know, the dedication, may I develop bodhicitta. And then Kandrila comes along and says, you don't get qualities just by wishing for them. And then you think, oh, that's so disappointing. We have to actually practice. And so sometimes that means meeting our uncomfortable edge, meeting resistance, meeting the edge of our comfort zone and saying, oh, okay. That's what it means. But we do it with a motivation. And the interesting thing is, the greater our motivation, the small, right? This is maths. The greater our motivation, the smaller the problems and the obstacles are in comparison. So if we just focus on the obstacle, the problem, the reason why, and why we don't want to do it, well, okay, we'll never get out of bed. But if we think, okay, listen, I want to do this because, pick your motivation. I want to help people. I want to, whatever your motivation is, the bigger it is, the easier it is to get past the problems, because they're not so big in comparison. They're quite small. So one of the, not to make it about myself, but it's just, you know, as an example I know well. So one of the things there's a special practice I hate doing. And I ask everybody to help me with it, and nobody wants to help me do it. And then I think, oh, and I make drama for myself, and nobody wants to help, and I don't want to do it. And when I do it, it's actually not that bad. It's something we do in Italy. I won't tell you what it is. It's a special thing, you know. It could be anything: cleaning, taking out the rubbish, pick one, like whatever it is. You know, we all have that thing we don't like doing. And it's not that bad. It's really not that big a deal, taking out the rubbish, cleaning the floor. One second. But the interesting thing is, if you have a motivation for doing it, it gets a lot easier. So if it's just about me and my dislike of the task, oh, such drama, such a big problem. But if I think, well, I'm going to take out the rubbish because that makes it easier for the volunteers. I'm going to wash the floor because then we have a nice clean gompa and people like a nice clean gompa. If I have a motivation that's bigger than just my comfort, it gets a lot easier. Yes?
Procrastination.
Right. Oh, procrastination, justification, avoidance, you name it. We have lists of reasons. This is another thing, Sirkong, I don't know if I said this last time. I don't know what I can't remember, but something Sirkong Rinpoche said, and it's so true. He says, we do what we like, even in our Dharma practice, and we've been doing what we like since beginningless time.
You don't like to leave our comfort zone.
No, we don't like to leave our comfort zone. That's why it's called a comfort zone. We're comfortable there. What kind of idiot would want to leave a comfort zone? Right? So we have to kind of, use our reason and say, okay, here's my motivation. Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's where I'm trying to grow. And then the third area where it's beneficial to have patience, to have this resilient mind, is when we're benefiting sentient beings. Benefiting sentient beings is tough. It's not easy. It's hard work. Quite often, let's say we have an idea of how much benefit we want to give, but then someone needs more help. Like, that's tough. Like, you can have 5 centimeters of benefit. I'm giving out 5 centimeters of benefit today. That's what I'm willing to give. And then someone says, but I need 6 or 10. And then you think, oh my goodness, I didn't sign up for this. And again, so that patient mind, that composed mind, that mind of resilience says, okay, what's my motivation? Benefit sentient beings, patience. And then you say, okay, and go ahead and do it. And I'm sure if you're running a Dharma center, you have to do this every single day. Patience, 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 patience. If you want to benefit sentient beings, you have to have patience. So what helps us in all of that is seeing the vision, having the goal, having the motivation, whatever that is. And of course, in our spiritual practice, we're aiming for enlightenment to benefit sentient beings. The bigger the vision, the more strength we have, the more energy we have to face the difficulties that confront us. And that can help us in having the mental fortitude of saying, okay, I'm facing a difficult situation, doesn't feel good, but I'm going to grow my capacity. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to proceed anyway. So, are there questions on that? There's probably one more thing I would add. Okay, maybe I'll add the one more thing and then we do questions. Okay? Okay, the one more thing that I want to add is self-confidence, because all of this, everything I've described, like I said, it's not beginner's practice. It's tough. You have to take it in stages. You have to take it in bite-sized pieces. And as Shantideva says, everything gets easier with practice. Everything that I've said, please don't use that as an excuse to say, oh, I'm not a good practitioner. Oh, I'm not patient. Oh, it's just another affliction I have. Sometimes we do this. Sometimes we listen to teachings and all we do is say, oh, that's just so far away from where I am right now. We're babies, we're training, we're learning, we do what we can, we put into practice what we can. So we have to be kind and patient with ourselves and acknowledge that we have qualities and rejoice in the qualities that we have and just take it in baby steps. Okay, so be gentle with ourselves, see it as training, see it as I'm making progress, and be kind to ourselves and not just say, oh, I'm not patient, that's another thing I'm not good at. That way of thinking is actually an affliction because we're disturbing our mind thinking about our negative qualities instead of rejoicing in the qualities that we do have and trying to grow them. Okay? So, with that, questions, objections, or suggestions. If anyone wants to share a suggestion or a story or anything like that. We have the microphone, yes?
Recording in progress.
Oh.
I have a question to ask.
Yes.
Is it necessary to put this on? So earlier you said that when we're facing adversity, we should also reach out. Like that's an action that will take us out of our challenges. But could you also elaborate on how exactly to reach out? What all does it entail? And especially in this world of relationships, right? Like how do we accurately reach out to the other person and open ourselves up to them.
Okay.
I did.
Okay, I'll answer that in two ways. So, in the specific context that I was referring to of Tonglen, that's more mental. And so, in that reaching out, what we're doing is we're imagining others that suffer in the same way that we do, and with empathy, we're reaching out in the sense of opening our hearts to them. We're extending our awareness to them and saying, okay, I want to be of benefit to them. So that's the way of reaching out. It's a sort of empathetic, compassionate way of reaching out. That's one way. And in that way, we're changing the mind from being so self-concerned and fearful and closed and shutting down to being open. And that openness and concern for others is a way of helping us develop courage. So that's for the Tonglen meditation. But very practically, sometimes we need to reach out in another way, which is we need to talk to a friend. We need help. There, it's a question of finding someone who you can trust, who is supportive, and saying, you know, I'm struggling. Is there a way that I could talk to you? You know, could you, and be clear on what you need. Do you just want to talk? Do you want them to advise you? Sometimes we just want to talk and be heard. Sometimes we want suggestions. So I think in that occasion, you can find a trusted person, be clear what you need, and see what they say. And very often, if we have a good person, just by sharing it when it's out, it's you know, it lessens a little bit. Sometimes we make things bigger in our heads than they are in reality. So reaching out in that way can help.
But it's not easy to find someone who's willing to listen.
It's not easy to find someone who's willing to listen.
They're all busy with their lives and their own problems.
They're busy with their lives and their own problems. You know, that is true, but we all have our lives and our problems. And so hopefully, if they're willing to be there for you sometime, then maybe you can be willing to be there for them sometime. Or, you know, you could just, if they're busy, if they have problems, well, maybe you could ask them and say, here's what I'm facing. Have you faced anything like that? How would you deal with it? Ask them for, you're not putting everything on them, but you're asking for advice. And most people like to be asked for advice. I just want to address, there's a comment in the chat. Okay, somebody says, I'm worried about practicing Tonglen as I've heard about people suffering energetically or even falling sick. Any thoughts on this? Okay, so on this topic, one advice that I was given was, if you're going to do Tonglen, don't do physical contact things like Reiki and massage at the same time. So that's one advice for avoiding. And actually, and in fact, physical contact is the only way I've ever heard of anyone suffering energetically. I was told there was one person, apparently a bodhisattva, who was doing Tonglen at the same time as a physical therapy, and she did get sick. That's the only time I've heard of. Other than that, usually it's the opposite. Usually, and in Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book, what's it called? The blue one, Universal Healing. Oh, I've forgotten the name. I should look it up. There's a book of Rinpoche's on healing, blue book. And in that book, he actually talks about how Tonglen helped people heal from illnesses. So I think one lady with cancer and one man who is HIV positive. Tonglen is, I want to say, just a meditation, okay? Just a meditation, in the sense that it's just mental, but it is very powerful. It's a very powerful mind because it's doing the opposite of what we usually do. We want to protect and hold on to ourselves, and this is the mind that says, oh, you know, let me open up and take on the suffering of others or remove the suffering of others. So by the power of the compassion involved in that, compassion is a very healing mind. So in actual fact, by the power of the compassion that some people develop when practicing this meditation, they've actually, some of them, I'm not guaranteeing this for everyone's meditation, but some of them are able to develop so much compassion in meditation, they heal themselves of illnesses. So rather than being harmful, actually the research has shown that it's, on the contrary, it's very beneficial and very healing. Not that that's the main reason for doing it, but, positive side effects. Okay. Oops. There are non-physical energetic therapies too. Yeah, it's true. There are lots of non-physical energetic therapies. Correct. Okay. Other questions? Thoughts? Yes.
So you just presented that, in fact, patience is the antidote to fear today. So to find courage to go out when we are expressing fear. Patience is also expressed as the antidote of anger.
Yes.
So is there the same patience, or is there a different definition of the term patience that it's used in different case? Because it feels like we have one tool for everything.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So patience is normally cited as the antidote to anger. That's correct. And there's a reason why. So in chapter 6 of Shantideva's Bodhisattva Way of Life, where patience is presented, he talks about anger and the disadvantages of anger. And he says it starts with a mind of liking and disliking. And so once we have the mind of dislike, then we very easily get this mind of anger. What is anger? Anger is the mental factor. It's the mind that wants to harm. So what Shantideva says is we very quickly go from dislike and unpleasantness to wanting to retaliate, right? Somebody says something mean to us, what do we want to do? Well, your mother, right? Or whatever, smack them over the head. So because of the unpleasantness, we very quickly go to this mind wanting to retaliate. So patience is the mind that is staying calm, composed in the face of harm. Well, a mind that is composed in the face of harm, that is just undisturbed in the face of harm, is not going to retaliate. It's not going to fire back. It's a calm mind that maybe observes, okay, something unpleasant, I'm being attacked, criticized, and so on. But the calm mind isn't going to retaliate. And in that way, it's an antidote. And his presentation of patience is in that context. Why am I using the word courage? I'm using the word courage because in the English dictionary, when it talks about courage, it says a mind that, despite suffering, is calm in the face of a difficult situation. So the Tibetan word is, we've translated it as patience, but when you look at, because when I asked, what should we do a talk about, and it came, courage, when you look at what courage is in the English dictionary, they're giving a definition that is very similar to what is called patience. So that's why I'm using a lot chapter 6, because this mind that is undisturbed, notwithstanding maybe feeling fear in the face of difficulty, is what we in the English dictionary call courage. Courage, resilience. There's lots of words we could use, but one of the, I think, difficulties we have as Westerners is when we hear patience, we tend not to see, we see it as a passive mind rather than an active mind. So the active wish to have fortitude, resilience, that is, if I use the English dictionary word courage, that is an aspect of courage. That decision to, okay, the mind that says, okay, I'm going to remain undisturbed in the face of suffering, that's a decision, that's a choice. That's okay, I have discomfort and I'm deciding to remain undisturbed in the face of that. It's called patience. When we translate from the Tibetan, we use the word patience, but it sort of doesn't do it full justice. That's my personal opinion. I mean, you're perfectly welcome to disagree on that, and it's good to have. And actually, I was down in Sarah, and I was talking with the monks. I'm like, okay, and we were having this discussion about the Tibetan word for patience and the Tibetan word for self-confidence, and Geshe was saying, yeah, but self-confidence doesn't have to be virtuous. And effort isn't necessarily virtuous. So we were trying to kind of pick apart all of these words and what do they really mean. And so patience being an antidote to anger is true, because you're not retaliating, you're not having the wish to harm, but there's a courageous element to it. If we're using the English word, it's messy. We're not getting just the word patience. Is kind of it's my personal opinion, it's not doing full justice to the meaning. So that's why I use the word courage.
Maybe we can switch it with perseverance.
Well, perseverance is a word that is used to translate joyous effort, which is the next of the parameters. And interestingly, we had a conversation about joyous effort, and I was told, no, that's not the correct translation. So yeah, we're trying to find words that encapsulate these qualities. Perseverance is again, perseverance isn't necessarily patience, because patience is in the face of suffering or harm. You can persevere with something pleasant. You could be, let's say, painting a tanka and persevere. You could have joy. That's what we normally call joyous effort, enthusiasm for virtue, right? So enthusiasm for virtue, perseverance, wanting to keep going, is slightly different to this mind that's undisturbed in the face of harm. But we're circling in the same kind of area, but there are subtle differences.
Just to come, why I asked the question is that because if it is the same, it's the same passions through the same definition. What surprised me is that in some situation it's extremely easy to apply.
Yes.
And in other situation is just we forget about it, or we have incredible difficulty to apply. So that means if it's the same remedy that we have to apply, why in some situations it's that easy, and we are not affected the same way, and in other situation we lose control. We go in a psychose, we go in a crisis of cholera, we are paralyzed, we cannot. So that's where my question is. So if at the end, if remedy is the same, why sometimes we are able to use it and sometimes not?
Because we're suffering sentient beings that have been suffering in samsara since beginningless time. And we have imprints of afflictions on our mental continuum that come up almost effortlessly. And usually in any difficult situation, something arises within us. It could be anger, it could be fear, it could be any one of difficult emotions. And that, Shantideva says, is the real enemy. That's what we're up against. We're up against, and in fact, I think it's in this chapter where he says, the real heroes conquer the afflictions, the rest slay corpses. So in the world, people think that what is valiant and courageous is killing other people. But the real heroes, he says, are conquering their afflictions. It is difficult because things arise in us effortlessly because we have imprints when we meet certain situations. And we've also been using our afflictions as the tools to deal with samsara and suffering since beginningless time. There's a wonderful text called, what's it called? Debate between wisdom and self-cherishing. And so wisdom is personified and self-cherishing is personified. And it's like they're kind of having a debate. And self-cherishing is pretty convincing. Self-cherishing says to wisdom, who has protected the self since beginningless time? Who's made sure it had food? Who's protected it from harm? Who's protected the person from beatings and so on? I self-cherishing. That's my job. Wisdom, where have you been? And you think, oh, he's got a good point. This is what we've been relying on. And self-cherishing is like, I have been the friend since beginningless time. It's true. We've been trying to cope with samsara for a really long time, and we've been relying on these methods that look like our friend. And to go against them, it isn't easy. That's the difficulty of being human. Someone online raised their hand. I think it was Neil. Yes. Oh, no, maybe not. No. Okay.
Hello.
Oh,
Hi.
hello. Hello. Neil?
Yes, Venerable, my question is what happens to my atmosphere when loving is ungranted? Is it possibly like karma?
Can you help me understand the situation? Like, give me an example. I'm not understanding. I'm sorry.
Okay. Basically, I feel that there is a situation between me and neighbors, and that's what is going on. I've been living here since a long time, long enough, but there isn't much of a congenial, loving atmosphere. So the atmospherics are there for older generation of neighbors or something.
Okay.
That's what I can tell you.
Okay. And what have you done so far to try to make more of a congenial situation?
Yeah, I try to reach out with as much kindness as I can offer, and sometimes
What
people
does
will.
reach out mean? What does reach out mean? What did you do? What did you say? I mean, not too specific, but what does reach out mean?
I'll invite some of them over, but they, because of my like lack of space maybe, or my single like I've tried,
Okay.
and somehow I'm Mr. Left Out or something. Yeah, that's the neighborhood I'm living in. It's basically
Okay.
that. I've
Okay.
discussed with others, and it's probably not just me.
Okay. Okay. Well, there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is you can't change other people, but the good news is you can work on yourself. So, there's one thing Rinpoche advised some people once when they were having difficulty with their neighbors. And he said, give them a gift. So maybe one day, instead of inviting them over for dinner, you just make some food and go offer them food, but without expecting anything in return. But you offer food because of who you are, because you want to do that. And then how they take it is just not in your control. It's hard enough to change ourselves. Forget about trying to change anybody else. But you can only work on you. When you think of them, you can think of them with kindness. Like you said, you've tried to have, you've tried to have good energy towards them. So you think of them with love. You think of them with kindness. You can take them some food round. Beyond that, there isn't much that you can do because you're not them. But what you have to do is say, I'm going to have a mind that isn't going to be disturbed if they don't behave in the way that I want, or in the way that I behave, or in the way that I expect, because we don't know them. We don't know them, we don't know their past, we don't know their upbringing, we don't know anything. But you practice, you develop your good qualities, you can offer, and then how they take that is just, it's not your task, it's not your responsibility. You do your best, that's you, and them is them. If only our good intentions could solve the world and fix everybody, right? You know, we can only really work on ourselves. And then we bring that out into the world, and how people respond to it, it's kind of up to them. They take it or leave it. Thoughts on that, Neil? What do you think?
Yes.
Report back. Or if you want to be really sneaky, you could find a friend that cooks really good food and take that round. But then if they do come round to yours for dinner, you just have to make sure you invite the cook as well. Okay. Other thoughts, comments, questions?
I was just thinking about uncertainty, and
Okay.
I was wondering if Buddhists have some explanation, or how do they explain? Because I believe that things like courage and things like perseverance and all of that, we have our own personal interpretations. You know,
Right.
like
Yeah.
this person also has his own
Yes.
personal interpretation of
Mhm.
what it means to be kind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So this is why I was just wondering, how do we explain, like how do Buddhists explain uncertainty,
Okay.
unknownness?
So in one of the four seals, one of the four foundational concepts of Buddhism is the idea that all produced phenomena are impermanent. So be that an object like a table, our life, our wealth, our health, all phenomena that depend on causes and conditions, all produced phenomena are impermanent. But that doesn't just mean, oh, it starts and it will end. That isn't the only meaning of impermanent. Impermanent means changing moment by moment. And we would say that that's a conventional reality of all phenomena. It's changing moment by moment. We might have the appearance of permanence, like the table appears solid, but science tells us it's mostly composed of space, and the physical matter within it is vibrating and making a sound. That's not how we see it. It looks pretty solid, pretty certain, pretty permanent, but not just the table. If we have health, we think our health is permanent. If we have a relationship, we think the relationship is permanent. Whatever good things we experience, we think that's impermanent. But in Buddhism, we say whatever is produced from causes and conditions is impermanent by nature. It will end, because when the continuum of causes that gave rise to it finish, the result will finish. And not only that, it's changing moment by moment by moment. So in that sense, that's the impermanence is maybe where we would link with uncertainty. We as sentient beings have the illusion of permanence, and then suddenly something happens and we think, oh my goodness, it's such a surprise. But from the Buddhist point of view, everything is changing moment by moment. So then you might ask, well, what do we do? What is there to hold on to? Where's the ground under our feet? And that's where our motivation matters, because the motivation we bring, where you might say, where is the ground under our feet? It's like, well, there isn't a whole lot. If we're saying things change moment by moment, there isn't a lot. So what do we hold on to? We hold on to our altruistic heart. We hold on to our motivation. We use every circumstance we can to cultivate the best motivation possible, with as much love, as much kindness, as much compassion as we can. Like Neil was saying, his situation, what can he do? Well, he can bring his good heart, his kindness, his motivation. And so that's where cultivating our own good heart is what guides us through uncertainty from the Buddhist perspective, because everything is changing. And again, because we have, the concept of karma, we also will say, let's say we're in an uncertain situation. We might say, well, one karma has finished and another karma has ripened. And that's part of why we experience what we experience. You know, why did we get sick? Well, a karma ripened to get sick. And that will finish, and then something else will ripen. So this notion of impermanence and flow and things changing moment by moment is how we would probably talk about uncertainty. Does that answer your question? Okay. Appearance of permanence, but the reality of impermanence. Hmm. Anyone else online? No? Nope. Okay. Anyone else here? Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Yes.
I just want to add a short comment. Ki, I see courage like in two ways, with myself and when I interact with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So when I interact with myself, most of the time, myself not so friendly talk comes when there's a dishonesty. Ki say I want to work on a project,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm just procrastinating.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I'm just procrastinating.
Okay.
So that just created dishonesty. Ki I want to do that, but I'm not doing that for
Okay.
some reason. So
Okay.
there's a gap, there's a dishonesty. And
Mhm.
from that, some self hatred or self diminishing
Mhm.
thoughts appear.
Mhm.
And it takes courage to put your ego aside and just acknowledge them
Right.
and be courageous. Ki, okay, I'm feeling that, but I can work on it.
Yes.
And it's okay to feel that way. And I don't have to beat myself
Very
on that.
important.
Yes.
You know, not everything that we think is true.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff, if you've ever tried to meditate, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
and you sit down and thoughts just come. They just come. And a lot of them are like radio noise. They're not helpful. They're not true. Just that you don't have to take seriously all these thoughts. And we have so many thoughts like this.
Yes.
And it's really helpful. They're there, you know, they're there, but we don't have to listen to them. We don't have to believe them. We don't have to take them seriously. They're just there. They're just there. They arise like the waves. They come, they go. And being kind as you are to ourselves and saying, okay, they're there, but I don't have to listen to them. A lot of this is just noise and it isn't even helpful. And then having the discernment, as you're saying, to work out what is constructive for me and what is just unhelpful. So yeah, we have to have, you know, courage to say, I'm not going to listen to that thought. It isn't helpful. It isn't true.
Exactly.
And sometimes one of the things I do to lighten it up, I'm like, you again? Like this again? Like they're not even original, these thoughts.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like surely come up with something new, but no.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, they're just like little gremlins.
And the other part being when I interact with other people.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes.
No. So what I realized ki most of the time it comes out from judgment, and that creates hatred. Ki I want to change him or her so much to make her or his life better,
Mm-hmm.
but instead, very unconsciously, I am just being judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't come from a place where I want them to grow. And because I am fearful ki I will be responsible for their growth.
Mm-hmm.
But over the time, I've realized it takes courage ki you have to have compassion and let them grow. And
Yeah.
everybody grows on their own pace. And even if they don't grow, it's not your responsibility. You pray for their growth, but at the end of the day, they want to have that change or growth.
Are you listening, Neil? Where's Neil? Yeah, there you go. Beautiful. Beautiful. That's so nice. And I love the honesty of that, that you looked at it and you're like, okay, this needs to change. And then you moved on and you grew. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And the lady behind you, I think.
Hello. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're a little quiet, but
Okay. I'll try to raise my voice in that
okay,
case.
yeah. Be brave.
So you made a mention about empathy
Mm.
some time back.
Mhm.
I'll share my personal experience with
Yes.
regards to it. When I was somewhere around 10, 12, I could feel the pain of the whole world. You know, maybe somebody sitting in Syria, maybe someone going through a lot.
Yes.
I did not know the difference between I and we.
Yes.
So I could not discern this is my pain or that is their
Right.
pain, right? It's too
Right.
much of empathy.
Yes.
And now I'm 35. It's been good 25 years. It took me really long because when you come out in an outer world, it's full of I, me, this, I won't say selfish, but self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I don't know how to explain it. It took me a really long time to understand, okay, this is their pain. I don't have to go through this pain. So the question I'm trying to ask here is where to draw that line, because there are certain set of people who are way too empathetic.
Okay.
In my case,
Yeah.
it might be slightly more wider that I'm, connecting with somebody sitting in some other country and, feeling the pain. But probably for other people, they might take the baggage of the people they know and they don't know where to draw the line.
Yes.
So even till date, I think, oh, this person might be going through a lot and that's why, he's or she's acting like this. So then I have to, get into that worldly affair and my self-awareness that, hey, think from your mind, not from that mind. I hope I'm
Okay.
not confusing you with a question.
No, and it's interesting. I got asked a similar question by a doctor, because he said he's at medical school. He said they're teaching us empathy, but then people get burnout. So,
Yeah.
so I'm going to borrow from Rasmus Hugard, and he did with us a really nice meditation on this. So the difference between empathy and compassion. So empathy, let's say, we don't have long to do it, but so we'll talk about it, and then you can try it. You can go away and try it. So he says, so the difference is, let's say you imagine a person who is suffering. So let's say it's the doctor, it's their patient, and they have to tell that patient they have cancer. And so, they imagine how that person is feeling, connecting with their suffering. And then you notice how you feel, and maybe you feel kind of heavy. So you work on the empathy. So you're trying to really connect with how that person is feeling, and you watch what goes on within you. Okay, empathy. Then in the second part, you take it a step further. You ask yourself, how can I help? What can I do? And so you visualize yourself as, I want to help. I want to relieve the suffering. So now there's some action, there's some empowerment in that. You're empowering yourself. It's a more empowered attitude than just, oh, I suffer with you, which neither helps you nor helps them. And a word on empathy. We think that we're feeling the emotions of the other person. We're actually feeling our own emotions. We don't know what the other person is feeling, but we hear the situation, we imagine how we think they are feeling, and we activate within us the emotions that we would experience if we were in that situation. And there's nothing to say that's how they're feeling at all. And when we do that, you might be feeling 10 times worse than they feel. So there's the doctor practicing his empathy because he's got to tell the patient that she has cancer. And she might come from a family of a long line of people who have cancer. She's perfectly prepared. She's kind of expecting it. She's already in her head worked out how she's going to tell her kids, the grandkids, and who's going to take care of the dog. She's fine. But you're there, with all your empathy, which is often projection. So instead of conjuring up needless suffering, it's good to connect. It's good to have empathy, but not to drown in sorrow. So empathy that connects and understands the suffering of another person can motivate compassion. If it motivates this attitude of, I want to help, what can I do? And what you can do might just be sitting there. If it activates the compassion, that's the wish to help, that's a more empowered attitude, that's healthy. But if you're just drowning in sorrow, that's suffering. And it's often quite paralyzing and doesn't help. So we have to, to draw the line and say, okay, empathy is useful if it helps activate compassion. If it just makes me drown in sorrow, sadness, and grief, it isn't helping anybody.
So are you saying until unless that empathy is being translated into some action for the other person, either that should be the way, or you
At
just
least an attitude, and we can't help everybody.
Yeah.
But if we have an attitude of compassion, an attitude of what can I do to help, and it might just be praying for them, that's it. But it's an attitude of what can I do rather than, it's like the saying, misery loves company. But who wants to be miserable, right? Don't stay miserable for too long is what I'm getting at. And I say that because there are so many people that end up kind of weighed down, they've got the weight of the world, like you were saying, the weight of the world, that doesn't help, right? If you can carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, please go ahead. I'll happily give you my baggage. But if not, then we need a healthier attitude, which is neither I shut my eyes to it, because that's the other extreme. I just don't want to see it. I pretend it doesn't exist, because that's the only way we can cope. So we either have that as a coping mechanism or dissolving in sadness, neither of which are constructive. So instead, we're trying to shift to the compassionate attitude of, how can I help? What can I do? At the very least, you can say a prayer for them, because that's a positive motivation. At the very least, puts an imprint on your mind stream so that when the conditions arise, you will be able to benefit them in future. When the conditions are there, the karma will ripen. So that's positive.
Thank you very much.
I think we are at time, no? Okay. Okay then. Any other questions? Comments? Okay. And if I haven't answered the question in the way that you needed it to be answered, please tell me. Like if it's not, if it's not hitting the spot, then please,
Self-confidence for you too.
Right. I mean, yes. Anyone else? Anyone online? If not, then we can do our dedication.
I actually do have a question.
Okay.
I guess you're getting late or something. Do you have time?
I have time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
No, really, I mean it.
I love this. I mean, I want it to be useful. So, yeah, go ahead.
So actually the quiz is like I have to actually take a test as well, because
Okay.
I'm actually studying Buddhism right now.
Ah,
So that's why I also have this question. I wanted to understand the concept of karma, because you said something like that this person fell sick, and it could be their karma or something from their previous life or something like that. So I just want to understand that why do we have such a concept in Buddhism that it's coming from our past life, and it's not, the answer isn't in the present life,
Okay.
Uh,
So, well, there are some karmas that are created that could potentially, if they're very powerful, that could ripen in the same life, but generally we present it that way. So I'm guessing you're familiar with the notion of karma being cause and effect.
Yeah.
Karma can have many interpretations, but we're talking about cause and effect. So that when you do an action, you put an imprint on your mental continuum that has a potency that when the conditions are ideal, that karma can ripen. Okay? That's what we're talking about, yes? So then why past, and why does it take a past life or a future life? Because we're creating karma all the time, and you need the conditions for the karma to ripen. In order for any result to be produced, You need all the causes that produce that. So if you want to bake a cake, let's say Neil's going to go and bake a cake for his neighbors now, like a nice cake, he's going to need the sugar, he's going to need the flour, he's going to need the water, then he's going to need the gas, the cooker. If any one of those things are not there, if he doesn't have the gas, he can mix the ingredients all he likes, but the cake isn't going to be produced. Equally, if you have all the causes and conditions together, the result necessarily will be produced, and you can't stop it. So everything needs to be present. So let's say, for example, you have from having practiced generosity in a past life, you have the karma to be very wealthy. You might not have met the conditions in this life. You might not have met the right opportunities. It can depend on so many things. And so then often what we see is, let's say sometimes a negative karma ripens. And this is, so the negative karma ripens. Let's say somebody gets sick because maybe that's some killing karma in a past life. And then they meet the conditions in this life, the bacteria, the virus, whatever, and they get sick. So the conditions are there, the karma is there, it ripens. But before, the conditions weren't there. It's very precise. Geshe Temple told a story once about a boy who was in a car crash, knocked off his motorbike by a lorry, still survived, but yet died a few weeks later choking on a piece of bread. I mean, it's so precise. He didn't have the karma to die in the car crash, but he choked on the piece of bread a few weeks later. It was very precise. It was a different karma that ripened. So very often why it can depend on previous lives is because the conditions have to be there. And it's said in the text, a karma can lay dormant on your mental continuum for thousands of lifetimes, waiting for the right conditions to ripen. It could take a long time for something to ripen, either positive or negative. Because we've got lots of positive karmas as well.
It's kind of like life affirming at the same time, but also quite paralyzing and like, I don't know. I mean, this concept is like kind of self-handicapping some ways.
But
that
you can change your karma.
No, that's interesting. I mean, of course we can change our karma, and what you said that we are, I mean it definitely informs us that we have to be very careful with our lives and with every life around us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this idea is sort of like scary.
Well, if it's scary, then you use your wisdom. You say, okay, what might I have done that I want to purify? Are you familiar with the concept of purification? Okay. So the idea of purification is that, let's say we've created a negative action with body, speech, or mind, mainly with our mind. The mind is the main thing, the intention, okay? The intention with which you do something is the main thing. Yeah. So you say, okay, I might have done unskillful things. I might have killed, I might have stolen, I might have done, whatever. And you think, okay, I regret that. And so the actions that were created, you try and purify them, which means, in a way, neutralize them. You're neutralizing. It sounds kind of holy purification, but it's more like you're neutralizing the power of them. So it's a bit like when you have a car crash and you hit the car and there's a dent in the car, and you get a panel beater who knocks it out from the other side so that it's back to normal. So you're using an opposing force to the force that created the action in the first place. That's what we mean by purification. And there are different components to it. So one is regretting the action that you did. That already starts knocking out some of the dent, neutralizing, taking the power out of the negativity. So just regretting the negative action already does something. Then there are other components as well. There's the action that you take. So some people recite mantras. There's lots of different activities you can do to kind of as part of your purification practice. And they'll have information here on that. And then you make the resolve, okay, I don't want to do it again. I might have done it in past lives. I don't want to do it again. And that then does something very powerful to the mental continuum, because it means you're not likely to create that action in future. So you're really kind of cleaning up the mental continuum, which is where the imprints of habits and predispositions exist. So that in future, either those actions that you regret don't bear any impact at all, or a very slight impact. Karma isn't just this kind of, inherited weight that you carry around. It's fluid, and you can reduce the potency of it. So just regretting an unskillful action already takes so much power. You know, I had friends, you know, yeah, I mean, I have friends who've killed people, right, and who went to prison for murder. Yeah. And one of my friends got let out of prison because I think he was, I mean, he didn't tell me the details, but I mean, I know he was involved. So one got let out and the other one is still there. And I was so worried. It's sort of like, you know, he killed somebody. I was so obsessed with the fact, you know, and so worried. And my teacher was a bit like, listen, if you kill someone, you go to prison, you probably have time to regret the action. You know, you have time to regret. I mean, you start your purification process. And interestingly, when he came out, he had such an appreciation for life. He was so aware of the negativity of killing. Not a religious practitioner, but I don't think he would ever do that again. Nor would he ever rejoice in anyone else's killing. So he's already done some of the work on reducing and taking the power out of the negative action he did. He's already suffered quite a lot. He tortured in prison, probably the result of something else in a past life, right? So it's so, you know, we're always, karma is something that we're changing. So you add, we're always creating actions, but you can also take the power out of what you've done in the past. You don't have to be a victim of it. So the purification is really a reversing of and taking the power out. That's how that works. So you don't have to be held to it. That's the first thing. Then you can create positive karma. And the other thing is you create the conditions for other people's karma to ripen. So someone else might have the karma to receive. Someone else might have the karma to benefit. And depending on your compassion and your generosity, you provide the conditions for that positive karma they have to ripen and for them to have happiness. So it is incredibly powerful. It's good to be aware of the responsibility that comes with that and to be conscious, but also see it as something very empowering. Yes.
I have two questions on
Okay.
this. The first one is that since we're speaking of cause and effect, then can we list down all the causes that create positive effects? And within that category, if we were to actually do that, what would you say is the biggest positive cause we can create so as to manifest the biggest positive effect?
Great question. So I'll take the second part first. The greatest positive mind is said to be bodhicitta, which is the wish to attain enlightenment to benefit all sentient beings. And it's said that someone that has that spontaneously and naturally, even their saliva, everything about their body has the benefit, the ability to heal others. So urine, excrement, everything. They have incredible power and incredible healing ability. Before that is compassion. So compassion is the precursor to that. Having compassion, the mind that wants to relieve the suffering of others. And I'd say probably as well, love, the wish for others to be happy. So if you have those positive minds, love, compassion, the wish for others to be happy, the wish to remove the suffering of others, anything you do is considered positive and powerful. And the wider the wish, the greater the scope, the more sentient beings involved, the more powerful it is. So it's said that, Pabonka Rinpoche says, if you offer a stick of incense, let's say to a statue, that's a good thing to do. You offer incense to the statue, okay. But if you do it with the wish to be of benefit to all sentient beings, the positivity is equal to the number of sentient beings. So that's a powerful way to do it. So the vaster the motivation, the more powerful the positive impact. So if you give food to a dog with the wish to be of benefit to all sentient beings, the power, the benefit is as vast as many sentient beings as there are in all the world systems. So having a vast motivation, the wish to be of benefit to all sentient beings, makes anything you do with that motivation incredibly powerful. There are lists of specific actions, 10 virtuous actions, 10 non-virtuous actions. There are specifics. But I think if you focus on trying to have a vast motivation, then everything you do with that motivation, eating, sleeping, walking, going to the gym, doing your job, all of that can become powerfully beneficial.
Yeah, that makes sense. But my follow-up question is that what happens when a person dismisses this ideology? I mean, everything that I'm thinking with this, the whole concept of motivation and higher motivation, I'm bringing it to existence because I believe in it.
Yes.
What happens if I simply refute it and like just go into living a very hedonist lifestyle?
Well, okay, that's your choice. You're perfectly free to do that. And lots of people do that. But then you're using up the positive potential you've created in the past. So, and here's the thing, once a result is experienced, the cause is extinguished. So it's like a candle. You make a candle with the candle wax and the wick, and the more you burn the candle, the wick goes down, the candle wax is evaporated, the wick goes down, and the candle finishes. So the positive potential that we have is the exact same. So if you live a hedonistic lifestyle, you can do that, you're at liberty to do that, but everything that is produced depends on causes and conditions. In the moment the result is experienced, the cause are exhausted. So you could do that. You'll use up all your positive potential. It's like spending all the money in the bank. Some people do that. You're at liberty to do that. That's your choice.
Would you say then that this law of cause and effect is very strict? Like it does not exempt anyone, whether or not you believe in it or not?
Well, but that's like saying chemistry is strict or physics is strict. Gravity is strict because it applies to everyone regardless.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Just for the cause and effect, it just make me think about something. What you are saying is that all the positive karma that has been accumulated by people making things for other people, contributing to the society, if there is enough people at one stage that are so selfish that they only work for their self-interest and they are taking advantage of others, they have the capacity to exhaust this karma and the society will dissolve. Also, if you want to look at that from a sociological perspective.
Or then the negative karma will ripen.
Yeah, but technically they are living on what has been built by generation of generous people who try to build up this country, for example,
Yes.
and this
Yeah.
society. And
Yeah.
if everyone is selfish and don't care about other one, this is
Eventually-
doomed to disappear eventually.
Yes, and then the negative karma will ripen, and then you have a whole bunch of other circumstances.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's
Yes.
scientific. Not, sorry, that's a logical scientific.
By that logic, I believe the entire humankind is suffering. Is it because of like is it like the past karma? Like did we like do something extremely pathetic to be coming into the world and to be witnessing so much perversion and so much hedonism, so much abuse?
Well, I try to think of it as whatever I see, I must have done too. Like, if they can do it, why not me?
Yeah.
At some point, I must have done the same. And that's not to beat myself up. It's just that helps me to understand and to not, like the gentleman here was saying, to not judge and to not put myself above. Because all of those people are also products of causes and conditions. So right now we're here, we're thinking about the Dharma. Maybe we met the Dharma in past lives and we're very fortunate to even think in this way. Well, maybe they didn't get that exposure. Maybe, maybe they weren't taught. Maybe if all these people creating these causes, if they'd had the opportunities and exposure we had, maybe they would be different. So, you know, we try to develop compassion towards what we see. We try to work on ourselves, which is as much as we can do. And we just manage our part, you know. But yeah, have we done unskillful things in the past? Sure, who hasn't? Not even in past lives. Come on, this life.
Exactly. That's what, right? Like, so I think the answers. This is why the whole idea of reincarnation and past life kind of baffles me, because I don't think so. Animals have bad karma. They just happen to be here, and humans abused them.
Well, so an interesting comment was made by one of my teachers. So he said, it was Keshe Temple, he said, you know, most of the negative karma is created by humans. So we wait so long to get all these fortunate conditions, but then we use it in such an unskillful way. And it's really us that create most of the suffering. And then, you know, you don't have to accept past and future lives. You don't, but cause and effect is something most of us are familiar with. And we have incredible fortune to be here. And yeah, some people use it just to create harm. And then you die, and what have you left behind? You know, we have a choice. You know, we have a choice with what to do with this opportunity. Mm.
I think a lot of times, like, people do not come for the Buddhist practice and everything is because of these two concepts, because these were the two concepts which were really baffling to me as well in the starting. Otherwise, I love the practice and I love the concepts because it all makes sense. It's literally like telling the humankind to be careful with everything that you do, because everything has consequence. But these two are a bit handicapping, because I believe, like, if we produce guilt in people's mind, then we're just going to, like, reach the same place.
And that's the problem, because we go straight from karma, cause and effect, to guilt. But we have to remember, every unskillful action that we ever did, we did with the innocent wish to be happy and not to suffer. We just did it with ignorance of skillful means. And everybody, every criminal, every pedophile, every bodhisattva, everybody wants to be happy and not to suffer. Everybody. We're all the same in that. There's no difference. Some of us have more skill than others. Some of us have more education than others. And how sad and how tragic that all of us that are so alike in our intention and our basic wish, some people really just have no clue. And they try to, not only are they born probably due to past lives with certain predispositions that if they follow them lead to all kinds of suffering for them and for others. Not only that, but they're completely ignorant of how to create happiness for themselves. And that's why we don't talk about, you know, when we say of the root of suffering, we talk about ignorance, not badness. Everyone has Buddha potential, the capacity, the potential to reach Buddhahood. But we have ignorance, just not knowing.
The self-grasping ignorance
Yes.
is the concept, right?
Yes. So due to ignorance, due to unawareness, all of us, with the wish to be happy and not suffer, do what we do, but some of us are more disadvantaged than others in not knowing the means. And boy, does that cause problems. So it's not about guilt. Guilt is an affliction. That doesn't help, right? It's just recognition. And all of it, it doesn't matter what you've done or any of us have done, we were doing the best we could with what we had at the time. Always, we're doing the best we can with what we have. And with what we've learned today, we'll do our best again tomorrow, and we keep going. Everybody is doing the best they can with what they have. But because of cause and effect, they're getting the result of the causes they create. And so what the Buddha is shouting is, create different causes. You know, and in the teachings, it's from chili seeds, you get a chili fruit, or whatever it's called. You know, you from a turnip seed, you get a turnip fruit. That's what you get. And you don't get happiness from killing, stealing, lying, cheating. You just don't get that. it isn't going to end well. You will get a result similar to the cause that you created. If you don't like the result similar to the cause, don't create the action. It isn't going to turn out well.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why we try and have compassion for ourselves and for others.
I have a question.
Mm.
We spoke a lot about impermanence, right? And then this acceptance that eventually everything is going to perish. And in the advent of us, just constant uncertainty and this whole thing that nothing is in our control, how do we find the motivation to sort of carry on, specifically if we keep aside the reincarnation part of it, right? There are a lot of people who have done great deeds in life, but have probably not, created causes, but probably didn't see the effects, at least in the, so even when you look, around that, or like just generally through your experience, I just want to understand that how do you go about, like, what do you do when you feel hopeless, and what do you do when you just feel like there's no motivation?
The same thing. So if you feel hopeless and you help someone else, you will probably feel slightly less hopeless. Okay. The minute we go from this, because when we talk about afflictions, we're mainly talking about a mind that is sort of focused on ourselves. That isn't to judge. Life is difficult, right? But to go from being closed off, be it sad, hopeless, whatever, to starting to inch out, to think about others, do something for someone else, in that instant, the healing begins and you will start to feel better. So, for example, as I said, I mentioned, someone in my family who was in that place, and I remember spending a lot of time worrying. She was meant to go for treatment, and I thought, but is she ever going to go? Like, is she going to leave the house? And she was in that area, and using whatever means she could, with the wish to be happy and not to suffer, to manage that in the best way she could, and in ways that, as family members, it broke our hearts, but she was doing her best. And then over time, she left the house, and then she went to the horses, and then she gave them food, and then she witnessed herself being someone who could give food and be kind and make the horses happy. When you witness yourself as being someone that can even do that, then your self-confidence grows, and then it gets easier, and you do more. And that's why it sometimes starts with, okay, I'll get up, I'll take a shower, I'll leave the house, because I don't want to stay in the space where I am right now, because I want to try something else. And that process can take months, it can take years, but there's so much healing in being able to help others. And if you can find even one person, one dog, one cat, one fish, there's always someone somewhere who can benefit from your existence, always. And then afterwards, notice how you feel. It's a strange thing that when we reach out and try and do something for someone else, we feel better. It's counterintuitive, right? But somehow that's the way it seems to work. And nobody teaches us this at school. But instinctively we know. It's like the saying, it's better to give than to receive.
But it doesn't sustain, right? Because if, for example, I do, I do volunteer and do help out a lot.
Okay.
But I feel good about it that day, 2 days, 3 days. And then I again start questioning my motivation. So it's usually not, I feel it's not continuous. It's not, I feel it's also you kind of are doing, it's kind of selfish because you're doing it because you feel good about yourself.
But
It's
that's
more
okay.
about
His Holiness calls it wise selfishness. Right?
yeah, but
You are allowed to feel happy.
okay,
That's permitted.
okay, maybe I'll give a specific example. So I'm going through some big grief because I lost my mom.
I'm
So
sorry.
so basically, yeah. So it just feels because she was a very kind person.
Right.
And it just feels like life has no meaning anymore. And then you just feel if everything is going to anyway go away, then how do you on a daily basis just find that strength to carry on? So sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you. So the grief of losing a parent is really tough, and it can touch you for a really long time, and sometimes when you least expect it. I think you also have to be patient with yourself now and acknowledge that you're grieving and not expect miracles from yourself. You know, and when the texts talk about the truth of suffering, you know, when the Buddha reached enlightenment, the first thing he did was talk about the Four Noble Truths. You know, he had something to say, and this was it, Four Noble Truths. And the first one was the truth of suffering. And when they talk about suffering, they start with birth, sickness, aging, and death. Because it's painful, and the pain is real. So there is a grieving process, and it's going to take time, and you have to be gentle with yourself. No, don't be sorry, because we're with you in this. And I think right now we want to give you a big hug, right? So be gentle. It's going to take time. Grief takes time. Just be easy on yourself. Give yourself all the time and grace you need. And when the suffering is there, when the grief is there, care for it the way you would care for a child, the way you would care for a friend. You know, suffering is there. And you just, you know, acknowledge it. Okay. And you can use your own loving awareness to embrace the grief in your heart. You can tell it it's okay. I'm here for you. Take all the time you need. Allow it to be there. And don't judge it, and don't push it away, and don't tell it it shouldn't be there. It's there. And give all of that compassion to the grief in your heart for as long as it takes. Thank you.
I just want to say that I'm really glad that you shared that because no, I just was saying that I'm glad that you shared it because we need such spaces where people come and become vulnerable with each other. I mean, that's exactly what courage is, what we were actually discussing.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't get to hear
a
lot of times people grieving in isolation.
Right.
And when you come out and you actually talk about it, I believe that it helps like that, you know, because life is finite.
Right. Yeah. It's so true. And we often don't want to show it. You know, we put on a mask, or we put on the kind of happy face.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, you know, if someone says, how are you? We don't say, actually, you know what, I'm struggling. But how much better would it be if we just put all that down and said, oh, you know what, me too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's courage, right? Like people just do not come out and be vulnerable and like share that, okay, I'm going through something and I don't know, but I don't understand. I think that's a lot, especially with, I mean, I don't have anything against men, but that's mostly that's mostly with men. They're just not courageous enough to share that they're suffering or they're like facing something.
Or maybe they have a different kind of courage.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean,
Getting
I don't know, I'm
angry.
not a man, but, you know, if you have to, let's say you have to financially support your family and you're in a job and your boss is a jerk, but you have to get up and go in every day because you're worried about providing, you know, that's courage. So it's different. And, you know, but it's true that providing this loving space, you know, that this loving, supportive space is a wonderful thing. And it's true, something that we could do more of because it's needed. And one day it's one of us, and then another day it will be another one. And to be held, you know, in loving kindness, without judgment, with understanding, is such a valuable thing if we would just allow ourselves to do it. And that's a great thing we can do. What was your mum's name? Kalini. Okay. Well, we will all keep her in our prayers. Shall we dedicate? Okay. So we can take a moment to really rejoice in everyone's contributions, their honesty, their suggestions, and in the warm and loving space that we've created for each other together. And how wonderful that is to have like-minded friends and people around us. And we can rejoice in everything that is good in the world and in our hearts. And so we can dedicate all the positive potential that we've created together today for the happiness and freedom from suffering of all sentient beings, all of them without exception. And we can imagine that we're offering our positive energy as healing for the world. We dedicate for peace, for the cessation of conflicts, for love and compassion in the hearts of all sentient beings. We dedicate for our families, our loved ones, those that are here, those that have passed. And if there is anyone in particular that's in need of your positive energy, this positive potential, then you can make your own dedications for them as well. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone, to Tushita Delhi, to everyone here, everyone online. You're a beautiful group of people. And so it's really been wonderful to be here. So I wish you all the best and every success in your spiritual journey, your spiritual path, because you're special people and this is a special place. So it's really been a pleasure and an honor, and thank you for your time and thank you for everything you've shared. It's really inspiring. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Venerable, for coming twice to Tushita, and I hope in the future you come again to India, and every time you come to India, please stop by and come and teach more here.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
And thank you all for coming in person and online, and thank you for your questions and testimonies, and thank you so much. I just would like to mention that we have many programs coming up. Before I forget, please accept this offering on behalf of Tushita.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And so on Monday, we have a guided meditation at 6:30 p.m. here and online. On Tuesday, if you want to purify your negative karma, we are doing a Vajrasattva purification practice, Tuesday evening, 6:30 p.m. as well, in person and online. Wednesday evening, we have our weekly debate classes online. Then not next Monday, but on the 20th, Monday 20th, we are very fortunate to be welcoming Sergong Tsenchab Rinpoche here at Tushita. I think many of you are familiar with Star Wars. Star Wars was created by George Lucas, and George Lucas was a disciple of Sergong Rinpoche's previous incarnation. Actually, in Star Wars, there is a character called Yoda that speaks a little bit funny English and has long ears, So Sergong Rinpoche was the inspiration for Yoda, actually. So if you want to hear from the reincarnation
the original Yoda
and of a very qualified master, we'll be welcoming you on the 20th, also 6:30 p.m. Here and online as well. Thank you so much.
Amazing.
Thank you again, Venerable. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone online. Have a nice evening. Take care. Look after yourselves.